There's a device sitting in the British Museum, Case 47, Gallery 70. It doesn't look like much. A clay pot, about 6 inches tall, iron rod inside, copper cylinder surrounding it, found in Iraq in 1938, dated somewhere between 250 BC and 250 AD. The museum label says ritual object, purpose unknown. That's a lie. In 1940, an engineer named Willard Gray looked at a photograph of the artifact and immediately recognized what it was. He didn't need to hold it, didn't need to analyze it. He knew. Because he'd built the same thing in his workshop in Pennsylvania in 1939. It was a battery. Gray built a replica, exact materials, clay jar, copper cylinder, iron rod. He filled it with vinegar, like the residue analysis suggested the original might have contained. It worked. 1.1 volts. Not much, but measurable, real, electricity. The ancient Persians had batteries 1,800 years before Alessandro Volta supposedly invented them in 1800. But here's what keeps me up at night. If this one survived by accident, found in a random excavation, cataloged incorrectly for decades before anyone realized what it was, how many others didn't survive? How many inventions existed, worked, solved real problems, and then vanished so completely that we don't even have the pottery shards left behind? I'm not talking about speculation. I'm talking about documented inventions, described in ancient texts, witnessed by multiple sources, used for decades or centuries, and then gone, completely, as if they never existed. This is the financial historian. I follow the evidence, the documents, the archaeology, the things we can prove existed and then disappeared. And today, we're tracing inventions that vanished from history without a trace. Not failed prototypes, not theoretical concepts, real working devices that people used and then lost. The question isn't whether these inventions existed. The evidence is clear. The question is, why don't we remember them? And what else did we forget? This story comes from 3 Roman sources. Pliny the Elder, writing around 77 AD. Petronius, writing around 60 AD. And Dio Cassius, writing in the early 200s AD. 3 independent sources, different time periods, all telling the same story. During the reign of Emperor Tiberius, somewhere between 14 and 37 AD, a craftsman came to the emperor with a gift, a drinking bowl, made of glass, but not ordinary glass. The craftsman threw the bowl on the floor. It dented, didn't shatter, didn't break into pieces, just dented, like metal. Then he pulled out a small hammer and tapped the dent back into shape. The bowl was fine, flexible glass, unbreakable. According to Pliny, Tiberius asked the craftsman, "Does anyone else know how to make this?" The craftsman said no, only him. He'd invented the technique, kept it secret. Tiberius had him executed, immediately, on the spot. Why? Because Tiberius understood economics. Rome's economy ran on precious metals, gold, silver, bronze. The value of these metals was based partly on scarcity and partly on utility. They were durable. You could make things that lasted. But glass was cheap. If you could make glass as durable as metal, but flexible and unbreakable, it would replace metal for thousands of applications. Cups, plates, bowls, containers, armor potentially, building materials. The value of gold and silver would collapse. The Roman economy would destabilize. The emperor's wealth, largely based on precious metal reserves, would evaporate. So Tiberius killed the inventor, destroyed the workshop, erased the technique. Now, you might think this is a legend, a cautionary tale, but 3 Roman historians reported it, and they weren't writing fables. Pliny was a natural philosopher who documented real observations. Petronius was a satirist, but his references to real events and technologies are generally accurate. Dio Cassius was a serious historian. And here's the thing. We know Roman glassmaking was incredibly advanced. They made glass that changed color depending on the light, dichroic glass. They made cameo glass with multiple layers carved into intricate designs. They made glass that mimicked precious stones so well that only experts could tell the difference. The Lycurgus cup, made in the 4th century AD and now in the British Museum, is made of dichroic glass containing gold and silver nanoparticles. It appears green in reflected light and red in transmitted light. The technology to create nanoparticle-infused glass wasn't supposed to exist until the 1990s, but the Romans did it 1600 years earlier. So, flexible glass? Not impossible. Difficult, yes, but not impossible. And if one craftsman figured it out and the emperor had him killed and the secret destroyed, it's gone. Completely. No trace. We can speculate about the technique. Maybe it involved adding certain minerals, maybe a specific annealing process, maybe layering glass with organic materials. But we don't know because the knowledge was deliberately erased. That's not lost through neglect. That's assassination of an idea. Heron of Alexandria was an engineer, 1st century AD. We know he existed because his writings survived. 13 books on mathematics, physics, and engineering, not speculation, actual instruction manuals. One of his books, Pneumatica, describes dozens of machines. Most of them sound impossible until you read the instructions. Then you realize these are real, detailed, specific, with measurements and materials. One of Heron's devices, automatic temple doors. Here's how it worked. The temple had a hidden chamber beneath the altar. Inside the chamber, a large metal sphere, hollow, filled with water. Below the sphere, a fire pit. When the priests lit the fire for a sacrifice, the heat traveled through the floor to the chamber below. The fire heated the sphere. The water inside boiled. Steam pressure built up. The steam was channeled through pipes. The pipes led to a hidden cylinder with a piston. The steam pressure pushed the piston. The piston was connected via ropes and pulleys to the temple doors. As steam pressure built, the doors opened, slowly, majestically, by themselves. To the worshippers, it looked like divine intervention, the gods opening their own temple, a miracle. But it was just engineering, pneumatics, hydraulics, heat transfer. Heron describes the entire mechanism with diagrams. And it worked. We know it worked because Heron's instructions are detailed enough that modern engineers have built replicas. They function exactly as described. But here's the mystery. Where are the archaeological remains? Where are the temple foundations with the underground chambers? Where are the metal spheres, the pipes, the mechanisms? None have been found, not one confirmed example. Either Heron invented these devices and no one built them, which seems unlikely given how popular his books were, or people built them, used them for decades or centuries, and then every single installation was destroyed or dismantled so thoroughly that nothing remains. The second option is more plausible, because when Christianity became the dominant religion in the Roman Empire in the 4th century AD, pagan temples were systematically destroyed. Not just abandoned, destroyed, torn down, stone by stone. The materials reused for churches. Any mechanical systems inside those temples? Dismantled. The metal recycled. The knowledge dismissed as pagan trickery, not worth preserving. By the medieval period, Heron's books were known, but his machines were treated as fantasy, impossible devices from a mythical past. It wasn't until the Renaissance that engineers started reading Heron seriously and realizing these actually work. But by then, all the physical examples were gone, erased. We have the instructions, but not the machines. Greek fire gets all the attention. The mysterious incendiary weapon the Byzantines used to burn enemy fleets. The formula that was lost. Everyone knows that story. But there was another Byzantine naval weapon that's even more mysterious, because we know almost nothing about it. In 941 AD, the Byzantine Empire faced a massive invasion. The Rus, Vikings from what's now Russia and Ukraine, sailed a fleet of over 1,000 ships toward Constantinople. The Byzantine fleet was outnumbered, outgunned. Defeat seemed certain. Then, the Byzantines deployed something new. Contemporary sources called them fire-bearing ships or automated fire ships. These weren't normal ships. They had no crews. They were loaded with incendiary materials, possibly Greek fire, possibly something else, and they were sent toward the enemy fleet, apparently under their own power. The Rus fleet panicked. Ships scattered. Many were burned. The attack was repelled. Now, automatic ships in 941 AD sounds impossible, but the Byzantine sources are clear. These ships moved without rowers, without sails catching the wind. They were directed somehow toward specific targets. How? Some historians suggest they were towed into position by regular ships, then released. But that doesn't match the descriptions. The sources say the fire ships maneuvered, changed direction, pursued fleeing enemy vessels. One possibility, clockwork mechanisms. The Byzantines had advanced clockwork. Heron's writings were known in Constantinople. If they built clockwork timing mechanisms into ship rudders, combined with preset courses calculated based on tides and currents, the ships could navigate autonomously for short periods. Another possibility, some kind of propulsion system we don't understand. Steam pressure like Heron's devices, or paddle wheels driven by stored mechanical energy. We don't know, because after 941 AD, the fire ships are never mentioned again. Not in later battles, not in technical manuals, not in histories. It's as if the Byzantines used them once, decisively, and then the technology disappeared. Why? Maybe it was too expensive, too complex, required materials or expertise that couldn't be sustained. Maybe the engineers who built them died. Maybe later generations didn't understand how to maintain them. Or maybe, like Greek fire, the technology was a closely guarded secret, controlled by one family or guild, and when that group was lost, to plague, war, or simply time, the knowledge went with them. Whatever the reason, the fire ships are gone. We have one mention in one source, a brief description, and nothing else. No archaeological evidence, no diagrams, no technical manuals. Just one historical event that suggests a technology existed, worked, and then vanished completely. In 1206, an engineer named Ismail el-Jazari published a book in the Artukid court in what's now southeastern Turkey. The book was called The Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices. It describes 100 machines. About a third of them are automata, mechanical figures that move, perform tasks, and interact with people. One of the most complex, a mechanical peacock. It stood by a wash basin. When someone washed their hands, the peacock would dispense soap. After washing, the peacock would offer a towel. Then it would return to its resting position. El-Jazari describes the mechanism in detail. Water pressure drives a series of gears and levers. The peacock's movements are choreographed using a programmable camshaft, a rotating cylinder with pegs that trigger different actions at different times. It's the same principle as a music box, or a jacquard loom, or a player piano, mechanical programming. And it's from 1206 AD. El-Jazari wasn't alone. Across the medieval Islamic world, engineers built automata, mechanical servants, mechanical musicians, mechanical animals. These weren't myths. They're documented, described in multiple sources. Some surviving manuscripts include detailed diagrams. But where are the actual machines? A few fragments survive. A mechanical hand, part of a water clock, but complete automata? None. Zero. Why? Metal was valuable. When a machine broke or when the patron who commissioned it died, the machine was dismantled. The brass, bronze, and iron were melted down and reused. The craftsman moved on to new projects. And the knowledge, it was transmitted orally, master to apprentice. El-Jazari wrote his book, yes, But the book describes what to build, not necessarily how to build it. The fine details, the tolerances, the techniques, the tricks that make complex mechanisms actually work, those were trade secrets, kept within guilds. When the Mongols invaded in the 13th century, when cities were destroyed and craftsmen killed or scattered, that oral knowledge was lost. By the Ottoman period, people knew that automata had existed. They had the books, but they couldn't build them anymore. The techniques were gone. In the 18th century, European clockmakers started building automata again. The Jacques-Droz family in Switzerland created mechanical figures that could write, draw, and play music. These are famous, celebrated as masterpieces of 18th century engineering. But El-Jazari had built similar devices 500 years earlier, and his were programmable. The European automata of the 1700s were fixed sequence. They repeated the same actions. El-Jazari's could be reprogrammed by rearranging the pegs on the camshaft. That's a level of sophistication that Europe wouldn't match until the 19th century. But we don't have El-Jazari's machines, just his book, and the knowledge of how craftsmen actually built them lost. This one hurts, because it's so close to changing history. Heron of Alexandria, the same engineer who designed automatic temple doors, also built a steam engine. It's in the same book, Pneumatica. The device is called an aeolipile. It's a sphere mounted on an axle. The sphere is hollow. Water is heated inside, steam builds up. The steam escapes through two nozzles on opposite sides of the sphere. The nozzles are angled. As steam escapes, it creates thrust. The sphere rotates faster and faster. It's a working steam turbine in the 1st century AD. Heron demonstrated it in Alexandria. Sources say it was a marvel, a wonder, proof that heat could be converted into mechanical motion. But it was treated as a toy, a curiosity, a temple trick to impress worshippers maybe, not a practical engine. Because Rome didn't need it. The Roman economy ran on human labor, slave labor, cheap, abundant. Why build complex machines when you have unlimited workers? But here's the tragedy. Heron's aeolipile was more than a toy. It was a functional proof of concept. If someone had recognized the potential, if someone had scaled it up, built larger versions, attached it to mills or pumps or machinery, the Industrial Revolution could have started in the 1st century AD. The technology was there. The principle was proven. Steam, pressure, rotational motion, everything you need for an industrial engine. And it was forgotten. Completely. By the medieval period, Heron's writings were known in the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. Engineers read about the aeolipile. Some might have even built small versions as curiosities. But no one scaled it up. No one built an industrial steam engine until Thomas Savery in 1698. That's 1600 years later. Savery's engine was designed to pump water out of flooded mines. It was economically necessary. England was industrializing, coal mining was booming, mines were flooding. Manual pumps couldn't keep up. The economic pressure was enormous. So Savery built a steam pump. Thomas Newcomen improved it. James Watt perfected it. And the Industrial Revolution began. But Heron had the technology 1600 years earlier. He just lived in the wrong economy. An economy that didn't need labor-saving machines. An economy where human energy was cheaper than mechanical energy. So the aeolipile remained a curiosity. And when Rome fell, when the library scattered, when the workshops closed, the knowledge faded. Heron's books survived. Copies were made, but they were treated as philosophical treatises, not engineering manuals. The idea that you could actually build these things and use them, that was forgotten. It took until the Renaissance for engineers to start reading Heron seriously again, and by then, the world had spent 1,000 years without steam power, 1,000 years of missed progress. All because one invention was ahead of its time, built in the wrong era, and then lost. The Baghdad battery sits in a museum with a label that says Ritual Object, Purpose Unknown. That label is wrong. We know what it was. We've tested it. It worked. But for 60 years, no one noticed, because the knowledge of what a battery looks like, how it functions, what it's for, that wasn't obvious from the artifact alone. If Willard Gray hadn't happened to see that photograph, if he hadn't recognized the design, that battery might still be labeled as a ritual object. The knowledge that ancient Persians had electricity would still be lost. How many other artifacts are sitting in museums labeled incorrectly because the knowledge of what they were has disappeared? How many inventions vanish so completely that we don't even have the artifacts, just mentions in old texts that historians dismiss as legends or exaggerations? Flexible glass, fire ships, advanced automata, steam engines, chemical formulas, all gone. Not because they were impossible, but because the knowledge was fragile and we didn't protect it. This isn't ancient history. It's a pattern, one that's repeating right now. Every year, traditional skills disappear. Master craftsmen retire without apprentices. Techniques that took lifetimes to perfect die with the people who knew them. We think we're safe. We have Wikipedia, YouTube, digital archives. Knowledge is preserved forever now, right? But digital storage is fragile too. Formats change, platforms shut down, and embodied knowledge, the kind that can only be learned by doing, doesn't transfer through screens. The blacksmith who can judge the temperature of steel by its color, the glassblower who knows by feel when the glass is ready, the stone carver who can read the grain of marble. That knowledge can't be written down. It has to be taught, person to person. And if we don't teach it, it's gone. The inventions that vanished from history are warnings, proof that human knowledge isn't permanent, that what we don't actively preserve, we lose. The Baghdad battery was almost lost forever, found by accident, recognized by luck. How many others weren't so lucky? We'll never know, because the evidence is gone, vanished, without a trace. And unless we learn from that, unless we start valuing knowledge transmission, preserving traditional skills, teaching the next generation, we'll lose more. The future will look back at us the way we look at the Romans. They had this technology, they'll say. Why did they let it disappear? And the answer will be the same. Because they didn't think it mattered. Because they assumed knowledge was permanent. Because they were wrong. If this changed how you see history and knowledge, subscribe, because I'm documenting what we're losing. The skills, the techniques, the knowledge that's fading, before it vanishes, without a trace. The inventions that disappeared teach us one lesson. Knowledge is not permanent. It has to be protected, taught, valued, or it dies, and we forget it ever existed.